Hey, I'm Bailey.
I'm Michael.
And I'm David.
And welcome back to Facing the Gates podcast. As you know, last time we talked with Pastor John at Bethlehem Lutheran Church, and we just got back from a service at Bethlehem Lutheran. It was different. It was probably most comparable to the Presbyterian church, but still a bit different from that.
Yeah.
So I guess we should probably start out with the architecture review, as usual, just so we can kind of paint a picture for people and they can know like roughly what it looked like.
Which, if you guys do want to see what the sanctuary looks like, you can look up the church even on Google, and you'll be able to see pictures of the inside.
Yeah, they have pictures on Google Maps, and I'm sure they probably have pictures on their website, which is also in the show notes. But basically, you would walk into the back area. They used high church language, so it was the narthex, what low church people would probably call the foyer.
The foyer.
The foyer, if you're like mid church or French.
No, that's what middle class parents use.
Yeah, sure. So anyway, that was, what you would expect. And then you walk into the nave or the sanctuary, and it looked like a church.
A lot of exposed wood.
Yeah.
Well,
pews,
stained glass.
He best described it like the ship.
Yeah.
The art.
Yeah. So you walk in, there's the floors are marble, there's a red carpet.
Going through the center.
Yeah, going through the center. There's pews on the sides. Pews have cushions, so that's nice.
Big ups there.
Yeah, they got obviously stained glass windows. All of them are they're very colorful stained glass windows. I like them. It's a flavor win.
Oh, yes. And to the left or to the right of, what is that word where the preacher is?
You're calling me out. Now I forgot it. Hold on. I'll tell you. It is just keep rambling and I'll be able to tell you.
Well, to the left and right of that, there are
transept.
There are two wooden things that have the hymn numbers on there. Not sure if y'all fellas noticed that.
Yeah. I did, yeah. It's like a little sign on the wall there.
And towards the center there is the
altar.
And where the little baptismal
font. They baptize through sprinkling, which is a little different than other ones.
Yep.
And then in the back where the body and blood of Christ would be shared to the people of the service.
Yeah, so you have the altar behind so basically you have, it's kind of, it's formal if you've ever been in like a Catholic church or something. It's kind of like that. It's shaped like a cross. You have the narthex in the back, and then you have the nave, which is the bottom part where everybody's sitting. And then you have the transept, which is the kind of the cross part, what you would think of if you're looking at a cross top down. That's the cross part, where basically only the pastor is allowed. And I asked him when we were talking yesterday, and he did say it's kind of a reference to the Old Testament, back the way temples were structured in Judaism. Was you have the Holy of Holies at the end where only the high priest is allowed in because that's where God dwells, and that was really a safety mechanism because if you go in there unworthily, you get zapped and can die. So the reference to the pastor only being able to go up there is kind of symbolic of that.
Yeah.
And then you have the baptismal font in the center there, and then on the left you have a podium where they read from the Bible, and then on the right is where the pastor would go to give his sermon. And then behind the baptismal font, which is probably the tip of the cross, You have the altar, and then you had the apse, or that whole area is called the apse, but they have the table, which is the altar.
Yeah.
And that's where they would distribute the Lord's
And
Supper.
as he said, with their altar, it's more forward instead of straight to the wall, which is a newer thing in the grand scheme of it.
And then there's also the candles at the back near the stained glass cross.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is a large candle behind near where the preacher gives the sermon. And the candles in the back at the start of the procession are lit off of the main candle. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed there are very similar lights to Pastor Trent's church.
Yeah, they have,
but they were more square.
Yeah, at Pastor Trent's at the Presbyterian Church, it was I think it was cylindrical.
Yep.
Kind of lights with the cross in them. Mm-hmm. This was more like rectangular. Rectangle cube. Was that what
yeah.
It's like a rectangle cube with a cross on it, basically.
And then open beams in the ceiling where you could see.
Yep, lots of wood grain.
And they very tastefully installed the speaker system where it didn't stick out too much, because it's hard not to have it stick out, but they did it very well.
Yeah, they attached them to they attached the speakers to the beams
and hid the wires really
at the top. Yeah.
And all in all, I really like that style of setup. It's very traditional, very quaint.
Yeah.
Because it's a smaller church.
Yeah, I think there's probably maybe 40, 50 people there today.
Yeah. And it really quaint, really serene and peaceful, which is something that I personally like. I like the old style architecture. I like the historical aspect behind it.
Natural lighting.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Did they even have lights in there? I think that it was just...
They had a few of the lights on.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Most of it was the light coming through the windows, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might have just had on because it was kind of overcast. Don't know.
Yeah.
But, hey. Still, I really didn't notice, like, oh, yeah, there's lights. I had to look up, and it's like, okay, yeah, there's lights there, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, the sanctuary didn't feel too foreign to me, because that's similar to what we grew up with, was an older style of layout and architecture, and I really enjoy that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely like that more traditional, historic architecture style, because it says church more than some of the other churches that we have been to that kind of aren't super, I don't know, it's just less intentional in the architecture, whereas this is like it looks like a cross. And also like the stained glass windows, for example, he mentioned that when we were talking to him yesterday before the interview, that it's kind of teaching you theology.
There was the bread and fish, there was the lamb, there were the Bible. The Bible. Every piece of glass had something different that is important to.
Yeah, it was biblical symbolism essentially in the very center. Most of it like the ones by the pews weren't like super complicated. It was mostly like just colors, and then in the center is like the Bible.
Yeah.
Or like you mentioned the bread and the fish. And then at the far end in the apse, there's the cross that was in a stained glass window with lots of colors. And then there's a couple in the transept that were more, I guess, detailed and ornament.
And larger.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the layout, the earthy colors of the wood, and it just felt right. Felt like a place of worship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, and on the kind of opposite end, heading out of there, there's the mess hall, and then we ended up in his office, which...
Right, on the other side of the sanctuary is some offices and some places to, like you said, a mess hall.
Kind of I forget exactly what you call it, but kind of as you know a lot of churches have somewhere where they cook and serve.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they also take meals to the shut-ins and a bunch of other things. So,
So I guess let's probably go ahead and start with the actual service that we went to today. He mentioned that typically they do the Lord's Supper. I think he said roughly about once every other week is what it boiled down to.
Unless it falls on an
A
important
feast day or something. Yeah.
yeah, and I think he mentioned, was it him that wanted to start doing it every week?
He wanted to bump it up to do it every week because he said they had gotten away from that. But today was one of the days they did not do it, so it was a little bit of a shorter service.
Yeah, which even with it being a shorter service, we were in there for what, 45 minutes?
It was like 40 minutes.
Yeah, but
we were in there a little longer because we got there a little early, but
it felt stupid short.
It didn't feel. It felt like half that time. It
felt like we'd been in there for 20 minutes and it was over. Which, if you can, through traditions, hold that audience, and if you are paying attention and enjoying something, it feels shorter.
Yeah.
And plus, in the service, it's very structured, which also helps for new people like us, where this is something very foreign to us compared to what we're used to. I was still able to follow along and understand everything thanks to them giving us a bulletin, which big shout outs.
Yeah.
And the structure of it.
We were greeted when we walked in. They handed us bulletins, and then they had the a guest sign in.
Yeah. And it was very structured, very flowing, and it felt like it was how it should be, is kind of what I want to say.
Yeah. That's okay. You can say that.
I don't know how else to put it, but we all seem to enjoy the more traditional services more than the more modern services, and that structure is part of the reason.
Yeah,
but there was a lot of preacher talking, then congregation responding due to the invocation, exhortation.
Yeah, we can go through basically everything.
Yeah,
but first, chair review. This is the first church that we've been to, believe it or not, that actually had pews.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean
but they had cushions on them.
Yeah, the Presbyterian. It was
chairs,
kind of like a in between.
Yeah, it wasn't like, okay, look, I'm not gonna say like it was the most comfortable, luxurious seat I've ever sat in, but like if you got the cushion for your cheeks.
That's what matters.
And then you got like the wood back. Okay, whatever. Like it wasn't painful for the amount of time that I was in there. I didn't feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So what do you?
And see, I can put up with the lack of modern luxuries like cushion chairs like we've had.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they didn't have cushions on those pews, it would have been painful.
I still would have dealt with it because I love the look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was also the child that would fall asleep in church.
So if it's uncomfortable, then you won't fall asleep. Oh, you would fall asleep on wood pews.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, there's only one set of wood pews that I found were extremely uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah?
At the church we were local to, the small church building, those were terribly uncomfortable.
I'm sorry.
Terribly uncomfortable. And I don't know what relation of church they were to us, but the church that we had like the lock-in and all that with, their pews were also terribly uncomfortable. Terribly uncomfortable. But these weren't bad.
Yeah. All right, chair review's done. We just had to review that because like we always do architecture review and chair review. That's always part of the thing. It's important.
But I'd give them a solid 8 out of 10 for me.
Yeah.
Classic pew.
I don't want to do ratings. I'll just like either you pass or you don't. So I would say they pass.
Yeah.
Classic pew with some cushion, a nice little slots for like the
Bible and hymn
to
book.
hymnals.
Well, they didn't have hymnals. They had the service book.
Oh yeah.
So, because with the bulletin, they put the hymns in the bulletin every week. So I wanted to look through it more. I didn't have a ton of time to do that, but they have like written out prayers in there, and that's as far as I got because I only looked at the first page. But then the service started.
And
then they have like the NIV Bibles for you, and they have, like I said, the service book in the back of the pews.
Yeah. So if you've been in a church with a pew, you know what to expect. I mean, this one just has a nice little cushion to it.
Mm-hmm. So we sat down, and once it started, there was a bell, and I kind of was like, "Hey, it's about to start, just so you know."
To go off our bulletin, service of preparation. After the bell tolls, please observe a time of silence.
Yeah, that was the one thing on this that I didn't read and didn't notice, but I'm glad you noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
so they had someone go up and take a fancy
candle lighter
that was on a long stick.
Yeah.
And there was a candle already lit up there. I took the candle, and then they went around and lit the other candles
in the back.
The 6 candles behind the altar.
On each side.
Yeah, while the pianist, organist, electric organ piano thing, I'm not really sure what it was.
I'd go pianist.
It wasn't quite a piano.
Yeah, but it wasn't.
But it was. They played it on piano, but the sound was probably more closer to like electric organ or something.
Well, essentially electric organ.
Yeah.
Though
so that
electric organ plays the same as the piano.
Yeah, they were playing that. That's in the very back of the church. So I wasn't paying attention to it because you're sitting in front of it.
And no, people, we don't sit at the very back.
No, we're sat in the middle.
Yeah, we usually sit in the middle.
Yeah.
Now the church that we went to the service before this, we kind of sat on the back.
Yeah, well, that's because
we were sitting with people.
We were led there. Yeah. And then Pastor John came up and gave some announcements. I like his vestige, by the way. The white robe.
Yes.
And the sash thing. It's not a sash. It's I don't know what it's called.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he had the green thing around his neck. It looked cool. There.
Looked snazzy.
Very, very informal review of his garments, but it's pretty dope.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then he, I think they started with a hymn.
Yep.
Was the first thing that actually happened.
A hymn and the invocation.
Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because the hymns that were sung, obviously you had the keyboards in the back. That's kind of, they'll play a little intro and then you start. But the pastor himself, this is the first church that we've been to where the pastor or any worship leader, no one is leading the worship. It's just the entire congregation kind of supposed to figure it out and just sing along with the keyboard.
They should
I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I noticed that he, after the announcements and before the hymn, he sat down and let the hymn play, and then he rose again. Mm-hmm. Which that's something that we've obviously haven't seen yet.
Yeah,
like
so I wanted to, because with a lot of these, I want to talk about like kind of the implications of why people do certain things. A lot of the other churches we've gone to, particularly the more mega church-esque ones,
the more emotional,
more contemporary.
Yeah, look, it looks like, it looks like they're bringing. You could argue, I'm not saying that they are, that's not obviously not their intention, but it looks like you're drawing attention to you and not to God necessarily. So I think when a church like this one, like the Lutheran Church, doesn't have a worship leader or the pastor leading the song, that speaks to it not being about him. I think that's what the implication is, that you're supposed to get from that, is that it's not about any one individual person, it's about God.
Yeah, you're not singing towards the preacher, you're singing towards God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like one thing I noticed was during the prayer, and I think he mentioned this yesterday, he turns and faces the same direction we are facing.
Yeah, so he puts his back to us and then faces the altar along with everyone, which is symbolic of he's no different than the rest of us. He's just leading that worship. He is not...
He's still just the mortal man.
Right. And a lot of more formal churches will do that.
Yeah. And then you brought this up on the car ride when you talked about the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
The how he did the cross.
Yeah. So there are certain points where he would, like for example, during the invocation, when he would say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, he would make the sign of the cross,
which is pointed out here in the bulletin.
Yeah, it shows,
which is really cool.
Yeah, it shows the cross there. No one else. Did you see anybody else making the sign of the cross? So he was the only one doing that. I don't know if that's a. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just an observation. But yeah, I'm not, again, super brushed up on this, but they Catholics and Protestants, by extension of being originating from Catholicism, the ones that do make the sign of the cross, they make the sign of the cross. They go from head to chest and then left to right on the shoulders, whereas Orthodox go top, bottom, right, left. Apparently that's how it used to be originally, but then Catholics changed it, and then obviously Protestants just kept that because that was what they were familiar with. I'm not super brushed up and familiar on that, but it's just one little
observation.
Yeah. Different Christian groups make the sign of the cross a little bit differently. So.
Yeah. And then after the exhortation, there were only 2 little bits of silence throughout, which this one is, as he said, was for reflection on God's word and self-examination, which is something interesting to me, because usually silence is in between, say, a song or a prayer, things like that. But this was kind of...
It moves on to the next thing, and it's constantly flowing. It's not like they're rushing to get through it. It's just it has a natural flow to it.
Yeah, and I like that the silences are plain and purposeful.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, for example, like the confession of sins and then the absolution. They were very call and response. So the confession of sins, for example, was spoken, but the pastor would say something, and then it's outlined, the part that the pastor says in the bulletin, and then it's outlined the part that the congregation says. And then a lot of the songs and hymns followed that same kind of format, where the pastor would kind of sing a phrase, and then the congregation would sing a phrase. So it's kind of like that call and response type thing. And there were a lot of songs or hymns that were chanted, kind of, using... I'm not 100% certain. I think it is Byzantine chant, but it's very like microtonal, and it sounds foreign if you haven't heard it before. But yeah, it was definitely interesting, because it's not like your run of the mill, like you just sing hymns
or you sing worship songs. Preacher comes up, gives announcements. says some Bible phrases and preaches a sermon, then you're out of there.
It's formulaic, but it's not. I don't know. They use the term liturgy, so they prefer to call it liturgy, which again goes back to that kind of high church language, which technically you can call any service liturgy. It's kind of interchangeable, but calling it liturgy implies that it's a little bit more formal and serious, and the structure is more intentional.
Yeah, and it felt like that.
Yeah. There were lots of hymns. There was obviously like your big number hymns, but then there were lots of little things like the Gloria in Excelsis. I mean, that was obviously that was a hymn. I'm trying to look for one, like the Kyrie.
Yeah,
that were a lot of them that were like fairly short, that weren't like full on songs. It was just kind of sung confessions, sort of. Which
is vastly different than what we are used to.
Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of. For the first portion of the service, it was kind of that call and response, hymns, announcements, and then there was the Old Testament reading, which this week was from Ezekiel 17, and then there was an epistle reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and then he did a gospel reading. Well, there was a song, hymn. It was a short Alleluia and verse. And then he read from Mark chapter 4, which is interesting because when we went to the Presbyterian Church, there was an Old Testament reading and a New Testament reading. And in this one, there is, the Old Testament and an epistle and gospel. So there's like 3 readings.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
And the service of the word from Psalms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was lots of like intermissions for the songs and stuff, the hymns, and some, like I said, some of them aren't super like hymns like you would think. It's kind of just like, probably the best way to describe it is sung confessions of what people believe.
Yeah, essentially.
Sorry about that. That was there's a
person riding a
4-wheeler that has I'm not gonna say it. And then one thing that I noticed on the bulletin,
mm-hmm.
what it gives a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
About
what do you mean?
Like
on the announcements on the back.
Yeah, people who, and he also mentioned the people during the service, but like in the prayers, their shut-ins, their adopted families,
mm-hmm.
and then if you look at the back, you also get the budget at a glance and things that currently are going on.
Yeah,
and even the attendance for the week prior,
mm-hmm.
which as someone, 1 second, get a crimp. But as someone who is outside of Christianity and looking in, that's transparency where a lot of places don't give you that transparency.
Yeah.
And
then after the readings, he gave his sermon, which wasn't super long. Like I said, we were in there for roughly 40 minutes, and some sermons,
oh my goodness,
are longer than 40 minutes. Just the sermon.
Yeah.
Not including everything else that's in the service. His was probably like 10, 15 minutes.
If that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was short and to the point.
And
it was. Go ahead.
As he referenced with Martin Luther, Word already has done it.
Yeah,
for lack of better terms.
He was essentially saying, he was quoting Luther that Luther believed that he didn't do anything. It was the word that did the work, basically. So he was like, don't stress about, when you're speaking to people, don't stress about, being good enough or convincing enough, because the word does the work in itself.
Yeah, which is vastly different from what we grew up around in Baptist circles.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of conviction, convincing, and things of that nature.
Yeah.
But
his sermon was much more I don't know, it was theological, I think. It's kind of hard to describe, because like I mentioned in the car, and I was having a difficult time articulating it, but it's kind of like he was giving, like the sermon was kind of an extension of the rest of the service. It was kind of liturgical and formulaic in the same way, but not like in a bad way. It's just like you would have to really dig into it to pull apart something like for example, if you were to go to like a Baptist sermon, like the moral is clear, and the overarching story.
Just say it out there.
Yeah, or catchphrases.
The overarching story or point to the message is clear, whereas he kind of brought a lot of little things, but there wasn't like one big takeaway. I think there was a lot of little things that
build upon each other.
Yeah, kind of related to one another.
How the service, because it builds upon itself and it flows in that way.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by it kind of feeling like an extension of that. Is it feels homogenous with the rest of the service, basically. And then then there was the Apostles' Creed that everyone confessed. He said they go between the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, and the Athanasian Creed.
See, I can only remember two of those names. I remember Apostle and the second one.
The Nicene?
Yeah, the Nicene. I can never remember the name of that third one. As much as I've heard you say it and other people mention it.
Yeah. That's all right. I did notice just an interesting observation in the Apostles' Creed, where it says, I believe in the Holy Spirit, and the following line doesn't say the Holy Catholic Church, it says the Holy Christian Church and Communion of Saints. Obviously, they don't want to be associated with the capital C Catholic Church. They believe that they are the lower C Catholic Church, lowercase c, as we kind of discussed in the interview yesterday, that they believe they are the one true church, but that they are not the institutional Roman Catholic Church, basically.
Yeah. They are the one true, but they're not the Roman Catholic.
Right.
They're not what we would, in modern terms, perceive as Catholic.
Yeah.
But the literal translation of the word.
Yeah, because those are weird, kind of weird religious words that people don't always understand at first glance. So what I like to phrase it is like, capital C Catholic is like the Roman Catholic Church. That's what capital C
the
Catholic
one with
means.
the Pope and all that.
Yeah. Little C Catholic Church. Catholic just means universal. So Catholic is the universal church. What the Catholic Church proposes, the capital C Catholic Church proposes, is that it is both the capital C Catholic Church and the little c Catholic Church. Whereas certain, like the Lutheran Church, they're going to say that they're the little c Catholic Church, that they are the universal church.
Yeah.
The same thing with Orthodox. There's capital O Orthodox, which refers to the Eastern Orthodox or maybe the Oriental Orthodox. And then there's the little o Orthodox, which might refer to like what C.S. Lewis would call mere Christianity, like the core tenets of Christian belief that like every Christian believes, basically.
Yeah.
So those words can kind of get confusing sometimes, and people will talk past each other if you don't know the distinctions on that. But yeah, after the Apostles' Creed, he did a prayer of the church. I think everything that he did was a written, formalized thing.
Yeah,
Because the in the back of the pews you have you have the Bible, and then you have the service book. There's written prayers in there as well. I assume he has basically everything that he does during the service is a formalized written thing, because that's typically what liturgy is specifically written, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned there's the offering, and that, you could go after or before. And then he did the offertory hymn, and then the congregation said the Lord's Prayer. Then he gave the benediction and one last hymn, and then the service was over.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much it. What did you guys think of it overall?
Short, sweet, to the point. Felt very formal. Felt very worshiping instead of preaching. Mm-hmm. Yeah, even though he is a preacher, it felt like he was just as much part of the congregation speaking to God as he is a preacher.
Yeah, Pastor John never gave me any ego vibe. He felt like he was very humble in how he spoke.
Yeah.
And even yesterday after we did the interview, he was like, I hope I represented Lutheranism to you appropriately, So, I mean, it was just good. I didn't get, which I don't think I've really gotten a major sense of ego from any of the people we've interviewed so far.
I'm not going to say anything.
Okay. All right.
But everybody at home.
All right. Well, let me put it this way. There have been people who have been more humble than others.
Yeah. And with saying that, I feel all their hearts are in the right place, but we are just mortals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's not a dig at anybody. Please don't take that as a dig at anybody.
Who is Michael humming about? Fine. Let's start a riot. Email us at facingthegatespod@gmail.com and tell us which one. Hey Michael, which was the one you were talking about there?
I'm probably not going to tell you.
Yeah.
Probably not. But
yeah, I don't know. What is there anything else what else do we need to talk about as far as takeaways from it? What about the interview? Is there anything that has simmered that you drew out or that you thought about?
Just sitting there, it kind of made me just think, kind of as Michael said with Pastor Trent, just kind of like a fireside chat with your grandpa.
Yeah.
He was
nice and peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Very peaceful. And that couch that I said,
very comfortable. Dude, the chair I was sitting in.
Not sure if you guys can hear this, but
yeah, it was
fabulous seating.
It was in his office. The chair I was sitting in was a big leather reclining chair that was very cushiony. Passes the chair review.
And
well, at least all the interviews I've been a part of, the chairs have definitely passed the interview.
Yeah.
Well, the review, not the interview.
Yeah. All the chairs in offices have been pretty good.
Yeah.
But
if they don't have anything else, they have at least good chairs.
Yeah. And I've enjoyed all these interviews we've done. Mm-hmm. But you can tell that these people represent which denomination they are. Mm-hmm. And you can really feel that with the different ways that they go about it and how they speak, their gesticulations, the words they use. And it really was just a relax. There was no pressure or anything.
Yeah.
Just a good talk.
Yeah, I like when he was giving answers, a lot of them were pretty short and sweet. He elaborated when he needed to, and if we needed clarification, he was willing to go into that. But, I mean, he didn't ramble on forever, which, I mean, no offense, but sometimes pastors can do that. They like to ramble on and get on their rabbit trails, which we do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're doing this podcast.
Yeah, this whole podcast is a giant rabbit trail of different
Rambling.
Yeah.
Of
And we
Mad
just
Men.
fall into different rabbit holes from time to time.
But I think that is a lot to do with, I guess, the way the service is done also, because there's no ego involved.
Yeah.
And so
It's designed to not be about you.
instead of rambling about, certain things, he kept it short, sweet, and simple when he needed to,
Yeah.
or when it was called for.
Uh-huh.
And
And when he gave he gave us a little bit of a tour of the sanctuary before we did the interview, and was kind of talking about the parts of the rooms and why they made certain design choices, and it was definitely very informative in the way that they structure their building.
yeah, if I was a preacher, I'd love to have a church like that.
Yeah, I liked it.
Could just sit in there, just think,
Yeah,
get that
And
nice natural light in.
it's always great because there hasn't been a church I haven't felt welcome at.
mm-hmm.
And as an agnostic, as someone who isn't usually the biggest fan of organized religion as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
it is great to see people take their faith and welcome people with
Strange piercings.
differing perspectives
Yeah,
and accept them in and talk, and because I knew nothing about Lutheranism.
mm-hmm.
I didn't know much about most of these denominations besides Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that is great, is it feels like we've all just been welcomed in to have these conversations and to get information.
Yeah.
And I think that's just an overarching theme.
Mm-hmm.
But this interview really just felt like sitting with your granddad and learning.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the service, enjoyed the interview, enjoyed the heck out of the building.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, stained glass. I almost bought a stained glass light bulb yesterday. Okay.
That exists.
Yes, they're at Target.
Okay. Wow.
So you got anything to add about the interview that you want to touch on?
I don't think so. I mean, I think he was very informative, and he like I said, he was to the point. He elaborated when he needed to, and I don't know. I think it was good. It was a good interview.
As Martin,
He answered the questions well, I think.
I think, as Martin Luther said about God's word, we can kind of put towards this and referencing that the words speak for themselves. There's not really too much more we need to ramble on about.
Yeah.
And if you do happen to want to join this church on a Sunday, they do have live streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of the churches we've been to have.
Yeah, most of the churches that we've been to have been trying to implement live streaming. A lot of churches have already, but especially with COVID, the ones that haven't have kind of been forced to learn how to do it.
At least,
So-
they were just doing it super simple.
Mm-hmm.
Now, say, I know Heights had their own app for everything, and I think Mercy did too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
But,
that comes with being a
bigger
large church.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But, yeah, if you want to find out, like, hey, do y'all happen to have a live stream or anything? Even if it's kind of more informal on Facebook, could just always send them an email, let them know you're interested.
Yeah, they most of the churches we've been to probably have previous broadcasts available either on their website or on Facebook.
And if you don't know, you can always shoot them an email.
Yeah.
You'll probably be excited someone's interested.
Yeah, we have all the obviously we have our contact information, but we also have the guest contact in each of these interviews and our thoughts. You can go check out the church, and if you're in the local area, you can connect with them, and if you're interested, talk to them.
But yeah, I'd recommend if, say, you are an atheist, an agnostic, or even if you have a denomination you follow, or if you're an undecided Christian, I'd really recommend, if you're listening to these, even if you don't watch the whole service, watching some of it to get a taste. Yeah. Like, that's what we're doing, going to these churches. We're getting a taste.
Yeah, we're not getting like the fully orbed, committed, experience of being a part of that tradition, but we are getting kind of a taste of it by doing a brief interview, getting some of the basic ideas of their theology underway, and going to one of their services where we can get just a snippet of what going to that church would be like on a regular basis.
Yeah, and there is one thing that I do want to say. I am a very pro-choice person, but I do appreciate that one of the things that they raise money for, even though it is a pro-life organization, it's one that reaches out and tries to help women through unwanted pregnancies, and it seems to me welcomes with open arms. And that's something that I appreciate. Instead of condemnation and fire and brimstone, they're welcoming in and forgiving and trying to help these people. And I think at the end of the day, that says more about what you choose to put your time and money into as a church also represents you as a church. And that's something that I respect the hell out of.
Yeah, I'm glad he explained what the two major things that they donated to.
I knew what Acts was already.
Yeah,
I'd heard of it. Because, I just wasn't super.
Like when we were, I'd say 6th grade, our mom worked at a food bank, and that's first how we found out about Acts, and then she worked at Salvation Army, I think, and they also worked together and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, but because our mom did those kind of social service kind of type jobs, that we found out about it. Yeah, but Acts is a big help for a lot of like the homeless population and stuff like that.
People getting on their feet or living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah,
and to me, even if I may be on the opposite side of a political spectrum, that doesn't matter to me as much as helping people.
Yeah,
I can put aside my differences if you're putting the effort in and showing that you're about what you say you are. I got all the respect for that in the world, so I gotta give it up to you guys, like, seriously.
Yeah,
and I think that was the last thing I wanted to touch on, because I was looking at the back of the bulletin, and that's something that hit my eye. Like, I need to talk about that.
Yeah,
but all in all, it was a pleasure interviewing. It was a pleasure going to church today, and short, sweet, and simple.
Yeah. It's been good, kind of, like you said, getting to know, because a lot of these churches, like, I've known one or two things about, but it's good to kind of experience it firsthand and be like, okay, now I know what a Lutheran or a Presbyterian church is about, because a lot of the churches I've been to a couple types, but I haven't been to a whole bunch.
Yeah, and
you haven't experienced the full spectrum.
And honestly, I didn't even know there was a church where this one's located, and I drive by there
every day,
almost every day.
Yeah,
and I kind of wish I knew it was there before, because I love the architecture.
Yeah. You got anything else, David? I don't think I have anything. I think it's pretty much it.
Yeah, pretty much it.
I think everything speaks for itself, really.
If you're interested, listen to an interview, get in contact with them, maybe view a live stream. If you're not in there, if you're in there, stop by and they'll be glad to have you.
Yeah.
And check out all our other interviews. Check out our social media, which are found on
Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
You can check out our podcast. Facing the Gates. You can check out our podcast on
everything.
Literally everything.
Basically everything.
There's not it's on Pandora and iHeartRadio. Who uses those in 2021?
Especially on YouTube.
Yeah.
Especially on YouTube.
Trust me, I know.
Yeah, David uploads the YouTube videos because he has better internet. But yeah,
I'm just terrible at putting tags in.
Yeah, it's all right. I take care of that for you on my end. But that's pretty much it. Next time we are if you thought, you know, the range of styles of services from contemporary to traditional, I think that, you know, we've gone to some very traditional churches, we've gone to some very contemporary services, but the very traditional, like that end of the spectrum goes a lot further
The smells and bells.
than we've experienced, and we might get to know that a little bit more next week when we are interviewing an Anglican priest.
Dun, dun, dun.
So yeah, that's about it.
I gotta say, it's been real.
It's been fun.
It's been real fun.
It's been real fun. It's been real fun.
It has been real fun.
It has been very
Oh, I swear.
real. All right, that's
Love
it,
you guys.
We'll
Thank
see
you
you guys
guys.
next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
Bye.